Joining us now to discuss, Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney of Wyoming. Congresswoman Cheney, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Great to be with you, Jake.
So the House Republican Conference voted for Elise Stefanik to replace you in party leadership. You weren't there. You were talking to Wyoming reporters, I'm told. Would you have voted for her, or would you have voted for Congressman Chip Roy of Texas, who, like you, is far more conservative than Elise Stefanik, and also, like you, refuses to push the big lie about the election?
Yeah, I would have voted for Chip. I think it's important for us to have people in leadership who are conservative, and I think it's also really important for us to have people in leadership who are committed to the truth and committed to the Constitution.
I want you to listen to what Elise Stefanik said after she was elected to replace you as conference chair.
Liz Cheney is a part of this conference. Adam Kinzinger is a part of this conference. They were elected and sent here by the people in their district. They are part of this Republican conference. We are unified in working with President Trump.
It's like she had me and then she lost me. Unified in working with President Trump? That doesn't sound like anything Adam Kinzinger or you would say.
Well, I think that, I've been very clear that what President Trump did after the election, what he did to provoke the attack on January 6th, what he continues to do in terms of the kind of language we know sparked that violence, and the claims he's making to undermine our democracy have made him unfit for office. I don't believe that he should be the leader of the party, and I think it's really important for us as Republicans to stand for the truth, to stand for the Constitution.
So you're not unified, I think it's fair to say.
Well, listen, I think that there are some very big issues that we need to grapple with as a party, and we need to be in a position where we can get back voters who left us in 2020, where we can convey to people how important it is to come together around a set of principles that we know are the right ones for the country. I do think that the policies that President Biden and Speaker Pelosi are proposing are misguided. I think they're harmful. I think they're wrong for the country. For Republicans to be in a position where we can stop those policies, we've got to be able to tell people you can trust us. You can trust us to be based around conservative principles and to reject the lie and to protect the Constitution.
So I've been listening to you since this began, this campaign of sorts that began. And one of the things that I hear that I think a lot of people in the media and maybe the public are even missing is, and you said this the other day, this isn't just about the past. This isn't just about the lie before the insurrection and the lie since the insurrection. It sounds to me like you're saying Trump tried to steal the election once, and he and his supporters, his acolytes, they're going to try to do it again.
Well, I think he is currently attempting to convince people that the election was stolen. He uses words like it was rigged. Every day now we see another release out from him, and it's really dangerous. What it does is it undermines people's confidence in our system. And ultimately, we've got to have respect for the rule of law. We had 60 state and federal courts that heard his claims, rejected those claims. The Electoral College met. That's the end of it. Now, of course, in this instance, it wasn't. But we've seen what he's capable of. And he hasn't expressed any remorse or regret for January 6th. And I think it's very important for people to understand the ongoing danger of a former president attempting to undermine the system in the way he is. And as Republicans, we have a particular responsibility to stand up against that.
But are you worried that he's going to try in 2024, and having now purged people like you, trying to purge people like Secretary of State Raffensperger in Georgia, et cetera, this time he might succeed?
He won't succeed. He may try, but he won't succeed. And, I think what we've seen is, and Secretary of State Raffensperger is a really good example of just the tremendous strength of local Republican officials around the country refusing to give in when President Trump was trying to pressure them. And I think what we've seen is how important it is, the role individuals have to play in defending the system, and how important that is. Our system held, the institutions held. There's an ongoing danger, and we've got to continue to stand up against it.
Our system held, but our system held, in my view, having covered this intensely, because we had 15 to 20 Republicans with integrity from Arizona to Georgia to Michigan to Philadelphia to Pennsylvania, Pat Toomey, standing there and saying that's not true. But if there's an effort to replace them, let me give you this hypothetical. What if Kevin McCarthy had been Speaker in January? Do you have confidence that a Speaker McCarthy would have upheld the rule of law, the Constitution, and voted to have those electors be counted? Or do you worry that a Speaker McCarthy would have bent to the will of Donald Trump and not not upheld his constitutional duty.
You know, I think what we have seen, and the Democrats objected also in I believe, 2000, 2004. They also objected. It's not only Republicans who've objected.
Fair, but
Now,
not a real effort to undermine the election.
I do think it's important, though, to be clear. There should not be objections. You know, the law is clear. The Constitution is clear. Congress's role is really ministerial. The Electoral Count Act is clear. If you have a slate of electors certified by a governor, then those votes must be counted. So I think that nobody should be in a position, you know, and you can look at senators as well, nobody should have been in a position where they were playing a political game or where they were objecting to those electors, and certainly not because they were trying to please then President Trump.
But do you have confidence that if McCarthy had been Speaker, he would have done the right thing?
You know, I think that you have to judge people based on their actions, and I think that you know, we're in a situation where nobody should have been objecting, and certainly after the attack, after we'd been evacuated and we were back in the chamber, I think that the approach that Leader McConnell took in terms of, you know, saying we're not doing this, that's what we should have done on our side, and it's not what happened on our side.
Well, you judge people by their actions. I'm judging Kevin McCarthy by his actions. Leader McCarthy, he lied about the election immediately after the election, went on Fox and said that Donald Trump won in a landslide. He signed on to that deranged Texas lawsuit that the U.S. Supreme Court threw out the window. And after the insurrection, he voted to disenfranchise the voters of Arizona and Pennsylvania. So I am judging him by his actions. And let me just say, as a voter and somebody who has a lot of loved ones in Pennsylvania, I worry what he would have done.
Look, I think that that's a legitimate concern. I think I've been very clear. I disagree with the way that he's led the conference. I disagree with those actions that you've mentioned. I think that when we're in elected positions, when we're in leadership positions, we have an obligation to the Constitution, and we have an obligation to lead with principle.
Do you think in all those actions that I just listed, he is complicit in the insurrection?
I think that is not something that I would say. I think that you've got criminal investigations underway. It sounds like we've got bipartisan agreement on a commission. And I think we will get to the bottom of understanding exactly what happened.
Kevin McCarthy, you talked about this bipartisan agreement, which just today we learned there is a bipartisan deal. It's going to be, Pelosi didn't want it to be 50-50, but it's going to be 50-50, 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans. Pelosi has said she's going to bring it to the floor of the House. You're obviously a very strong Pelosi critic, but she has signed on to this. Kevin McCarthy hasn't signed on to it. Why do you think he hasn't signed on to it? Do you think it's because he's afraid that he's going to be subpoenaed?
You know, I think his views have been clear about it. He said that he thinks the commission ought to be broader, that it ought to focus on BLM and Antifa and violence last summer. I think one of the places where we very much have a difference of opinion is I've said, no, that's not right, that this commission really does need to be bipartisan, equal numbers of Republicans and Democrats, and that it needs to focus on January 6th. If you look at our history and you look at what we did after Pearl Harbor, what we did after the Kennedy assassination, after 9/11, we have to have this kind of a fact-finding commission with subpoena power, and it ought to be focused just on January 6th and the events that led up to the attack.
I want to play for our viewers what you said about why some Republicans were resistant to this commission.
I think that kind of intense, narrow focus threatens people in my party who may have been playing a role they should not have been playing.
I know you're not going to name names, but what role are you concerned about people in your party having played?
I think if you look at what happened after the election, if you look at what's been reported publicly about meetings that were happening at the White House, for example, where the president was reportedly considering things like martial law and seizing voting machines. If you look at the extent to which there were members of Congress involved in that, I think that it's really important for that commission to have the independence and have the authority to get to the bottom of every single thing that happened, to get to the bottom of those people who were encouraging and promoting the big lie, those people who seemed to think that abandoning the rule of law and abandoning the Electoral College was somehow consistent with their constitutional duties.
What is it like standing up for what seems, from my perspective, to be just kind of basic decency, law and order, constitutionality, and be shunned by House Republicans. It looks weird from where I sit.
Well, you're not a House Republican.
Right.
So,
True.
Listen, I think that to me, it's very clear what is required here. And it's not, some people say, well, it's courageous. I don't think of it that way. I think, you've written about men in particular who have real courage. This is not landing on Omaha Beach or being at a forward operating base in Afghanistan. This is duty, and it's about truth. And we've had a collapse of truth in this country. We've seen an evolution of general situation where conspiracy theories are rampant, where good people, and in a lot of instances, have been misled and believe things that are not true. And so I think that we all have an obligation to make sure we're doing everything we can to convey the truth, to stand for the truth, and to stand for the Constitution and our obligations.
And I agree with you on that note. A lot of these people, a lot of Republican voters who think the election was stolen, they're victims in this too. They've been lied to.
Right.
Congresswoman, stay right there. We're going to take a quick break, and I have a few more questions for you on the back end.
Okay.
Stay with us. We're back with our politics leading Congresswoman Liz Cheney, who has had a week, I think it's fair to say. You've said it's up to the Justice Department to decide whether charges should be brought against President Trump or anyone else for inciting the insurrection. But you're also an attorney, and you've studied what happened that day, and you were part of it. You were in the Capitol. What specifically do you think needs to be investigated that President Trump did? You alluded to the conversation about possibly declaring martial law or seizing election machines.
Well, I think that the Justice Department, will handle that. I don't want to get in the middle of telling them how they should investigate or what they should investigate. I think that, if you look at the grounds on which we impeached, and certainly the president's activities and actions leading up to January 6th, I think the period of time on January 6th when he did not send help was clearly an impeachable offense. Whether or not that's criminal is something the Justice Department will determine. I think the important thing is to make sure that the investigation is not interfered with, that for political reasons from either side, and either the White House or Republicans in Congress. I think that it's very important for the nation that the investigation go wherever it may lead, and that the Justice Department, be able to pursue that and hold people accountable.
We've talked about the commission before, the bipartisan commission in Congress. Do you think Kevin McCarthy has something to share, and he's reluctant to talk about it? He did talk on the phone with President Trump that day, and according to Republican Congresswoman from Washington State, the conversation was very contentious, and Trump was siding with the insurrectionists.
Well, I think that that's exactly the kind of thing a commission will look at. They will look at the whole range of what went on that day, what went on in the days leading up to it. And I would imagine that's something they'll get to the bottom of.
Needless to say, this is not your dad's Republican Party, I think, that we look at right now, with the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and Matt Gaetz and Louis Gohmert, many others in Congress who are embracing Trump's big lie, none of them condemned by party leaders. In fact, the only person that I can tell that's faced any repercussions when it comes to the big lie and the insurrection are not, Mo Brooks, who helped incite the crowd, or Gohmert or any of the others. It's you for refusing to lie about it. What does that say? And if the House Republican Party now stands for lying, is it worth saving?
We have to save the party. I think the country needs a Republican Party, and certainly, the ideals and the principles that I believe in should be reflected in that party. I think that part of the challenge we're facing on both sides, I think it's been especially clear on my side recently, is that, we need to incentivize people who want to come to Washington and do real work, people who want to come and actually legislate. And we also need to get back to a time when we could have really vigorous policy debates where we were confident enough in our views and our side of things that we could stand up and argue for them and make the case. But that we didn't have the kind of vitriol flying back and forth that we certainly have over the course of the last several years. And people ought to want to be there and work hard and not be social media stars. That's not the right reason to be there. The vast majority of members are there for the right reasons, but we've got to find a way in our society to incentivize more substance, more seriousness, the issues we have to grapple with as a nation are really important, and they're very consequential, and we need people who are up to that task and committed to doing the hard work of coming up with the right solutions for the country.
But your view of the Republican Party is a minority view among House Republicans right now. I mean, I know you want to fight for it, but can you win this fight? I mean, it's going to be super tough.
Well, it's right, and we have to win it. And I think there are several things going on. I think that, as you pointed out before, people have been lied to. I think that it's really important for all of us to get to the bottom of what happened in 2020, what happened on January 6th, and to go forward looking towards truth. I also think that you have more members who believe in substance and policy and ideals than are willing to say so. And in some cases, I mean, if you look at the vote to impeach, for example, there were members who told me that they were afraid for their own security, afraid, in some instances, for their lives. And that tells you something about where we are as a country.
That's
if
terrifying.
Members of Congress aren't able to cast votes or feel that they can't because of their own security.
One of the reasons why I think why this has been so distressing for me as somebody who also wants there to be a thriving Republican Party is I want there to be thriving policy debates. And I now question about if this congressman, who I previously respected, is willing to lie about this, what else are they willing to lie about? But I want to ask you about some of these important policy disputes because they're important right now in the Middle East. There is this conflict between Israel, the Israeli Defense Forces, and Hamas. Palestinian militants, terrorists from Gaza, have been launching a barrage of rockets into Israel. Obviously, Hamas is classified a terrorist group by the U.S. government. But I do wonder, this particular conflict began because of the eviction of some Palestinian families from East Jerusalem. And then it started spiraling out of control. Then Hamas started throwing in the missiles and indiscriminately in civilian centers. Do you have any concerns about the spark, the idea of them removing, the evicting of the Palestinian families in East Jerusalem?
Well, I think that you have to look at the specifics about that eviction. I think you had a situation where the Israelis had, in fact, honored some of the property rights that the Jordanian government had provided. And certainly, a dispute about an eviction it should never be a justification for the kind of terrorist attacks we're seeing now. I think that it's a pretext. You've got Hamas, having placed its weapon systems in hospitals and schools, putting civilians very much at risk, launching attacks. And then you have people on the Democratic side of the aisle here in Washington, for example, standing up, against Israel, saying that Israel doesn't have the right to defend herself. I think the important thing actually is for Israel to win. The important thing is for us to be able to defeat Hamas and for the United States to stand with Israel as she defends herself.
Let me ask you, you praised the Trump administration for the Abraham Accords, and rightly so. This is a peace between Israel and several Sunni Arab nations. But your former colleague at the State Department, back when you were a State Department employee, Richard Haass, now president of the Council on Foreign Relations, he says that he thinks the Abraham Accords are in a way partly to blame for what's going on because there was so much energy in that and no attention on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. What do you make of that?
Listen, I disagree with Richard on that one. I think that the idea that forging peace, which was historic, somehow is responsible for Hamas launching rockets and attacking Israel and killing innocent civilians. I think that's a stretch. I disagree. I don't think he's right on that. I think that ultimately Israel's got to be able to know that they can defend themselves. They have to know that their security is going to be guaranteed. They have to know that there's a government on the other side that will root out terror. There certainly isn't right now.
Nope.
And we've got to be in a situation where again, America has to stand with Israel, and particularly in this instance where Israel's been attacked and is defending itself.
Congresswoman Liz Cheney, thank you so much. I know it's probably been a stressful week, but we appreciate your coming and taking the questions and hope you'll come back. We have a lot of policy to discuss that does not involve Donald Trump.
Great. I look forward to it.
All right. Thanks so much, Congresswoman.